Welcome to the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, where we explore the impact of EdTech on the student experience with engaging, fun, and relevant conversations that honor the wide range of work happening all across the higher ed ecosystem. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell. I've been working in and around higher ed for the past decade, focused on student support and digital experience. Join me every week for discussions with some of the best minds in education technology. We'll be bringing you their perspectives on how digital transformation is reshaping the way we recruit, engage, and graduate learners. You'll hear firsthand accounts of how institutional leaders are developing their strategy, as well as get deeper on the stories of how these EdTech tools are being built to foster better student outcomes. With that, let's get to today's episode. Welcome back, everyone, to another live episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, recorded here at South by Southwest EDU in Austin. Very excited to have a member of the Britebound team, formerly known as ASA, new brand, and excited just to kind of talk about that, but also just further kind of uplifting the great work that your organization does. So, Greg, if you want to just briefly introduce yourself and your background, and then we'll get more into the work that Britebound does and what brings you to South by.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for having me. So, Greg Smith, VP of Marketing at Britebound. Been in this space in marketing and advertising for about 30 years. Probably 2/3 of my career was spent at big agencies, and then the other third has been on the client side. Joined Britebound about 4 years ago.
And just briefly, if you want to just explain, kind of the elevator pitch of the work that Britebound does, we'll dig in more with that, but then also kind of what brings you to South by EDU this year.
So we are a national nonprofit that is changing the way kids explore careers, experiment with careers, and then navigate the pathway to their chosen career. And so we do that in multiple ways, through digital experiences, through funding, through advocacy. And what brought us here is really to, again, just continue to promote the brand, especially the new brand, Britebound, and all the great work that we do, and try to see who else we can partner with to make an impact.
Yeah. Because you all have a installation that's really awesome out there, and I know just like part of sessions and doing interviews like this, which I greatly appreciate. So if you want to talk about that rebrand, I guess just to kind of give it honorable mention here, kind of what led into that, and kind of how it came to be of choosing the name, any fun kind of anecdotes I guess you want to share from that experience.
Yeah. So again, previously we were American Student Assistants, or ASA. And that name served us really well when you think back to the history of the organization. We started as a loan guarantor company. You had to co-sign a loan back in 1956 when we started. And so the name made perfect sense, right? When people hear the name, they think we're some type of financial services company. Well, we've stopped that part of the business and expanded in many new areas, which is really the reason for the new name, Britebound.
Yeah, and I think it is that idea of it's tough, I think, where people know of you, with that name, but it doesn't really apply, to what you do and everything like that. So it is always I guess a moderate little of risk involved, but it's really that idea of an opportunity to kind of refresh, the brand and all that, and have it be more indicative of the work that you're doing currently. So, and I think, to kind of just dig in with that current work, because I've always known you all just sort of observing kind of from the sides, because you aren't directly working in higher ed, but I feel like it's so kind of relevant and impactful. So if you don't want to just kind of start us with kind of a broader question, what makes the early career exploration efforts that you do so important when it comes to I guess on its own merits, but then certainly kind of drawing the parallel to or the connection into post-secondary success, the work that you all do. What's the positive impacts that it has, but then sort of drawing the connection to post-secondary success.
Yeah. Anyone who's been around young kids, I've got some of my own. You're amazed at how young they're now starting to think about careers. My youngest came to me in 8th grade, true story, and said I wanted to get into commercial real estate. And I laughed, thinking he knew nothing about commercial real estate, and he actually did. And so we've realized that kids are talking about this in middle school now. A lot of times they're looking at careers before they're being influenced by their peers as to kind of what might be a cool career and what may not be a cool career. So we find it's important to get in front of them early on when they're not really being influenced in certain directions. And then you just think about, the path forward, right? I mean, when you get into high school and you need to make a decision about what you're going to do with your life, if you choose college, if you think that's the right thing for you, that's a very that's a big financial decision to make, and you need to be certain that is the path for you, and that this is the journey you want to go on, and that it's going to pay off. Because so many kids start college, leave college without that degree, yet all the financial costs associated with it. So it's a big decision to make. And I'd say also, especially now with all the non-career pathways that lead to great careers that just kids and their parents and teachers aren't familiar with, that's something we're really focused on, just educating others on what those pathways are and what they can lead to.
Yeah, and I think that is huge, just people knowing the variety of options, and certainly anymore it could be the modalities of learning and fully online, fully in person, hybrid, and all the variety of institutions or things like that, and the length, options that you have, versus, just assuming that you have to go for a 4-year degree or bust or whatever. I really kind of got bullish on the idea of if you can get any sort of credential, some sort of certificate, whatever, and parlay that into getting, more gainfully employing job. Hopefully they'll have some sort of tuition benefit or whatever, and you can kind of keep sort of, uplifting yourself that way, and take advantage of, a lot of states have sort of free college programs, certainly if, you're coming out of high school to, just kind of get started somewhere. But even just, the idea of the sort of Goldilocksing your way to kind of know I like this, or it's too much of that, or not enough of this, and
right.
Those sort of things. So, I guess start that, because we can kind of go a little bit chronologically. So speaking about that sort of piece of okay, you're working with a a middle schooler or a high schooler, you're doing a lot to kind of expose them to things to know oh yeah, this is what it means to actually be working in commercial real estate versus just I watched a TikTok video and it seemed cool. It's okay, cool. Well, let's explore that a little bit more in depth to see what that actually looks like day to day and that sort of thing. So just speak to that of the exposure part of people doing career exploration in a early stage.
And that's really critical to us, and so we focus on that really in high school, right? So as kids start to hone in on career tracks that feel right to them, how do we get them exposed to that career? Obviously, real life experience on the job training is great if we can make that work, but you can also do that virtually, et cetera. So we really try to give kids that exposure because, as you just said, some jobs sound cool or look cool until you actually try them. But that's important, right? We want you to know, do you love this job, or maybe do you not like it at all? That's okay, but you're not going to make the wrong decision and go down a path that is not right.
Because I guess it could be as much as a guest speaker in a classroom to actually maybe going on site or taking a field trip or something.
Right.
Is that kind of the idea? It could
sure,
be anything.
There's a lot of different ways, and I mean, in video and kind of virtual reality is a great way these days to kind of go around, go along almost for a test ride at an office with a lawyer, whatever it might be. So there's lots of ways to kind of give them that exposure, and so we kind of look across all those different avenues.
Let's take a quick pause to talk about something big happening this summer, the Engage Summit 2026. The next era of higher ed isn't about adding more tools. It's about building the agentic campus, where AI works alongside your teams to recruit smarter, support students faster, and scale impact without burning people out. From real-world examples of agentic systems in action to hands-on sessions that show how AI can coordinate enrollment, marketing, advising, and operations, Engage Summit is where institutions move from experimentation to execution. If you're ready to design a campus where AI doesn't just assist, but instead acts, learns, and drives outcomes, then you'll want to be in Charlotte June 15th through the 17th. But it gets even better. As an Enrollify listener, you can grab your ticket for half off. Just head to engage.element451.com and use code Dustin50 to apply the 50% off discount. That's DUSTIN50. All right, let's get back to the conversation.
Yeah. VR is I forgot about that.
Yeah,
of
right.
that becoming because I talked with the current CEO now, Julie Lammers, years ago about this work and everything. And it really is even just in that, and I think it actually was here at South by years ago. But that idea of that being something a big evolution and it being much more accessible. I think it still has some ways to go to be even more accessible, but that has been a mechanism for that kind of thing of either that exploration or even in the classroom, just getting a much better kind of experiential learning stuff. But
agreed.
And so then I guess on the other side, that idea of, I'd imagine more so in kind of the high school phase, it's that idea of understanding okay, if you know what you want to do, here are all the ways that you can get there. Is that kind of the
Correct,
philosophy?
So that third phase is really navigate, is what we call it. And it's just exactly that, understanding what is the path to get to this career that I'm interested in. Is it an accreditation program? Is it micro accreditations that I can put on top of something else? Or do I need to go to college? Is it 2-year? Is it 4-year? We're not trying to steer kids in any one direction. We're trying to expose them to all the different careers and the pathway to get there so they have a plan when they graduate high school.
Yeah, because I feel like in my mind, too, it's the idea that, like, people, I think, get maybe a little too stuck up on, like, prestige and, like, the, name brand institutions and that sort of thing. Like, they just have this concept of, like, going to those places, which obviously, like, they are good institutions and all that, but it's kind of the idea of, like, you could get a great education that really much more aligns with what you're looking for. They would love to have you. They might throw money your way, or obviously there's other, like, maybe like state programs for like the public institutions in your state and that sort of thing. So it's even just like some of the practical components maybe of like the funding and all that. Like, do you see that kind of come up where it's like people might realize, okay, oh my gosh, yeah, I can go to like, the school down the road, so to speak, and get like a great package and a great experience. Like, they're a little too preoccupied with the idea of like, well, I've got to go to NYU and do whatever. It's like, yeah, you and everybody else. So like, it's tough to get in there, but like also just at least like broaden your perspective a little bit of like what, options could get you where you want to go.
Yeah, no, I think that's very true. And we've seen a real change there. I mean, yes, I think the prestige of college and the big names used to be what it's about. And for some, that's still something they aspire to achieve. But I would say, half of the kids in Gen Z, aren't focused on the big names anymore. They understand kind of the financial implications of it and the reality that they can get probably a very similar education at a much lower price, better internships possibly, et cetera. So there's a lot of benefits that come with, other options than the big brand name schools that everyone used to be so focused on. They're just no shot at them, but they're not needed for many kids. They're just
right.
Not.
Because, yeah, I mean, like, they serve a very small fraction of learners in this country, and so they feel like they kind of suck a lot of the air out of the room, unfortunately. But, yeah, I mean, I think it is just nice, I think, to, like, get folks into, I know, like, a mantra for me is the idea of, like, it matters less where you go, but what you do while you're there. So the idea of, like, knowing, kind of that idea of, like, well, yeah, it'll probably be, that much easier to get into, like, a leadership position in a club, or to, like, get internships or some sort of, like, campus work or, whatever else. So, yeah, I think that idea of like kind of going in those phases, like you mentioned, of like the kind of exploring and all that, and then like the navigation piece. So I guess, yeah, like any other kind of, as a student is like approaching high school graduation and everything, like what's that sort of like period like as they're like making the decisions for what they're doing, and then as you maybe are, I guess kind of setting them off on their path or whatever, I guess just that approach of that sort of like that transition when they are, making that informed choice for their post-secondary journey.
Yeah, I'd say a few things about that. I mean, hopefully leading up to that point, they've been very involved with our products, right? And hopefully have learned a lot. But at that point, we see they then usually want to have conversations with trusted adults, whether that's their parents, a mentor, a coach, whatever, and kind of share their thoughts, what they've discovered, what they're feeling, and looking for validation on kind of those recommendations. And, as long as they get them, usually they then go forward with that plan. But that's one of the areas that we're focused on a lot right now, is trying to equip parents, teachers, counselors with more information, especially around the non-degree pathways, because they are so new. And yet everyone's really interested in them because there are real benefits to pursuing a non-degree pathway. But what is the accreditation program that's really worth the investment? What carries some weight? And so we're doing a lot of work in that area, trying to give those adult audiences that information so they can advise their child on that decision, and not just leave it up to the kid, especially if it's a choice other than college.
And so I guess, like, is part of your thought there, like, that idea of kind of a repository of information of, like, options in that area? Or, like, what, I guess, in terms of that idea of, like, yeah, there's a lot of curiosity and interest in those, but maybe, people don't know where to look, I guess, to evaluate things.
Yeah, so the solution is still being figured out, to be honest. I mean, we know there's a desire for a lot of information. We know what that information is. Right now, it's just figuring out what's the best way to serve it up. Is it some type of digital platform for adults, similar to digital platforms we've built for kids? Does it take some other form? So that's really what we're thinking through right now, because we really are taking action on these new audiences this year. And part of our rebrand effort was to really get the brand in front of those audiences. We've never really directly marketed to parents, to teachers, to counselors. They may be aware of who we are through programs we support, but we've never really purposely gone out to promote the brand and solutions to those audiences, and that's part of what we're doing in 2026.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, that's time well spent for sure. Appreciate you and your team committing to that, because I think, yeah, like you said, that's just like one kind of trend line that I think a lot of people are kind of examining, that there's just great opportunities, and kind of stacking those things. If it is like, okay, I'm pursuing a lot of non-degree stuff, and I do eventually aspire to pursue a degree of some form, and some focus, but I mean, that's just like the same spirit, like just more option, like whether, just even the idea of like, I want to get a 4-year degree. It's like, yes, let's broaden your horizon a little bit and consider more options there. But even just the options of like, whatever you might want to do to get you where you want to go, just understanding the variety of like, options and supports that, might be there. Cause I know there is like a lot around like, workforce development in certain states, like they, these like in demand fields, they might want to, get people kind of churning and, getting into those as quickly as possible. And they'll do kind of different innovative formats and, lengths for those kind of programs and stuff. So that answers, I mean, like, what are you excited for on the horizon for your work? It sounds like that would be one area, but please do, if there's anything else that you all are doing that's recently announced or that you're excited for kind of in the next year that you want to like tease or kind of uplift, like stuff that you're working on.
Sure. I mean, I think the biggest thing is we've got a brand new product that's in beta testing right now in different regions of the country. It's been received incredibly well. It's called GoZig, and we will be officially releasing that mid-April. So about another more month to go, but that offers us a whole new set of features and functions that none of our previous products did. Embraces a lot of state-level data, embraces AI, and really helps and kind of focus in on that navigate phase that we talk about, really that final phase of connecting kids with employers in the region who are actually hiring for the jobs that they've got the skills for. So we're excited to kind of close that part of the path.
Yeah, that's awesome. We'll eagerly anticipate, hearing and seeing more about that.
Yep.
And all the other things that you all are working on. But as we wrap up here, our just kind of consistent closing question to kind of give you the final word, advice that you would give to other leaders navigating this moment.
If you are going to rebrand, make sure there is 100% reason for doing so, and it passes everyone's test, because it is probably 3 times more the work than you expect going into it to do it well. But when done well, it can yield great benefits. So far, our new brand and name has been incredibly well received. So we're excited for it, but it's a lot of work. So be ready.
Yeah, and it's funny. I actually relatively recently talked to somebody else about that. We got into details, because I think it is like, on one way, like, certainly like ed tech companies or different things, they might be doing that kind of work. But even for institutions, it's kind of the idea of like, because you're acknowledging like, we haven't really like directly marketed to parents or, just that idea of like, if an institution is being like, okay, we do want to focus more on, adult learners or our online programs, like you do kind of have to like present yourself in a different way and be really thoughtful about that versus just sort of like, kind of copying something over and just trying to like, target it differently or something. So I think, it's good advice across the board of like, do your due diligence, give yourself plenty of time, if you're kind of really wanting to present yourself differently to different audiences and all that kind of good stuff. But I mean, like you said, like the upsides of being able to kind of engage in a better way as you're kind of expanding the scope of what you're doing and everything is great. So just appreciate you, Greg, for hanging out and sharing all you did. Was ways to connect with you and Britebound in the episode description. But just great chatting with you.
Appreciate the time.
Thanks for listening to the Higher Ed Geek podcast. This show is a proud member of the Enrollify Network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow. So be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit Enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.